So just as a quick introduction, so I'm Eve, Client Relations Officer for Open Programs, and we will be joined today by Bryan Lukas. So he is the Academic Director of Executive Education and also Professor of Marketing here at AMBS. Fab, so just kick-starting with a bit of an overview of executive education at Alliance Manchester Business School. So we have over 50 years of servicing clients worldwide with our award-winning professional development courses. So as you can see, we service clients in over 6 continents, and we've won awards like the EFMD Excellence in Practice, and have built up a really strong portfolio over the years. So research was taken into why people invest into their professional development, and the reasons on the slide, like gaining new skills, career progression, and identifying future opportunities for yourself, might resonate with some of you on the call today. So off the back of this research, we developed a portfolio of short business courses that are really relevant topics to today's business landscape. So it's worth noting that some of the content today features really heavily in our Unlocking Strategic Competitive Advantage course. So if you do have any questions about that, or want kind of more info, then we can arrange a call off the back of this webinar. So as a kind of a brief overview of our short courses, so they are designed for managers and senior leaders who have 3 to 5 years experience and are looking to kind of take the next step in their organization. So it really helps with succession planning. They're 4 days at our purpose-built Executive Education Centre, which is on campus at the business school. And you also receive a digital badge for each course, and also you can stack these courses up. So 4 courses equal the professional diploma in leadership as well. So that is definitely worth noting. Fab. So I will hand you over to Bryan. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Eve. So welcome, everybody. So my name's Bryan Lukas, and I'm going to pick out one of these short courses that he referred to, and just pick out some material that I think might be of interest to you, and to give you some takeaway, not just here's a sales pitch or something, but to actually give you 2 or 3 points that you can take away today as knowledge, but at the same time to use that to showcase the kind of material we'll cover in short courses, and in particular in this that I conduct, which is the Unlocking Strategic Competitive Advantage. So this is the purpose of the next section of our meeting. As Eve said, it's 4 days, but the 4 days are broken up nicely. So first of all, it's attached to the Hyatt Regency. You just walk through a door and you're into the executive center. If you want to stay in that hotel, you can stay in other hotels as well. Or if you are from the greater Manchester area, obviously, you come in from home. But that's the idea, is to have people from all around the world, and that's what we usually have. A lot of people from the Middle East like to come to Manchester. And in this particular short course, and they're all set up as 4 days, all the different topics, and you choose 4 and they lead to that diploma. And each one in its own right is a professional certificate in the course's topics, so a professional certificate in competitive advantage in my case. So all are set up on 4 days, and all these 4 days are broken up, often with an excursion to another location. And in this particular course, and I will focus now on Unlocking Strategic Competitive Advantage as a showcase of all these 4-day short courses, we would, for instance, go to Old Trafford, and we would explore how Manchester United actually uses its positioning, how it thinks strategically, what does it look like in the case of the stadium. We have a guided tour, so it's a personal tour, individual tour. So that's one sort of afternoon event. It also facilitates bonding. It gets us out of the building a bit. We also have always at least 2 guest speakers from industry. notable guest speakers, not just anybody, and they will speak usually for about 2 hours with question and answers afterwards. They either start after lunch, so then they're with us during lunch before it starts, or towards the end of the day, and there might be some drinks afterwards. So there's always an opportunity to talk to these speakers. So we have at least two, some have three speakers. So what you can imagine is each day is there's, of course, interaction, there's the learning, teamwork, breakouts, then the guest speaker. Second day, we would have the same, but maybe the guest speaker just before lunch or immediately after lunch. On the third day, we would head off in the afternoon. In this case, we go to Old Trafford and visit Manchester United and just sort of try and put some of the learning in the context, in this case, of a sports brand and managing a mega business. This is billion pound business. Strategically, and how that's done, how that manifests itself on site when you look at, for instance, the retailing, the shop experience, the merchandise, the myths, the storytelling that comes with such a place. All of that is explored, and then on the fourth day we continue with another guest speaker in my case, and then in the afternoon you would then present your work, because you'll be given a task at the beginning that requires you to apply what you've been learning to a particular situation at your workplace or at your previous workplace. And that you would then discuss in the afternoon in a 10-minute presentation with question and answers afterwards. And you won't believe how much interaction that creates, because by then you've got to know each other quite well. You might have gone out for a drink or dinner with some of the participants. So by day 4, in the afternoon, it tends to be a very engaged, sort of fun afternoon, totally applied to different people's businesses and their own problems. And you can interact and say, well, in my business, we had a similar problem. We did this and this. These were the roadblocks. This is how we got over it. So it's that learning among each other that we try and facilitate, and making contacts with each other is very much part of every 4-day program, including this one. Okay, now in terms of this particular subject matter and some of the things you might want to take away if you're interested in competitive advantage, just if by attending the seminar, not coming anymore, I want to do a bit of that, give you something, so your time with us today at 12 has been reasonably well spent. This course is, if you look at the title, there's that word unlocking, and then there's strategy, and then there's competitive advantage. And the premise here is that most people who come to us and are interested in sharpening the strategic thinking and are interested in trying to really shape that competitive edge that they need for their business to basically dominate the competition. So the words here, dominate, win, beat, these are sort of this the kind of thinking we have in this course. But you come with already a set of competitive advantages, certain capabilities and competencies in the business, certain resources, because you are an ongoing concern. You're already in business. So the idea is to unlock that, to take what's there and to bring it to the fore more, to reshape it, re-emphasize it, maybe cull certain aspects of the way you position yourself, and then drive that business to the next level. So that's this idea of unlocking. This is not about, people come here and they've got nothing and they don't know what to do. This is really about people who are working in a business that's already reasonably, successful. It's in business, but it's not number 1 or number 2. And it hasn't grown to the next level, although there's potential. And this is about unlocking that potential strategically, moving to the next level. What does it take? What are the tools that we use in such circumstances to drive businesses to the next level? So that's that. It's then strategic, of course. This is about setting the strategy for whichever objectives you hope to achieve. Let's say you want more market share, you want customer retention, you want to reposition the brand. Now, all of this requires a strategy. And then in the end, of course, the result of this is to then have something that gives you an edge, a competitive advantage. In the finance industry, they talk about a moat that surrounds your business. In other words, makes you impenetrable, protects you in the face of competition. So that's the outline of the 4 days. And underlying that are a couple of overarching messages, which I will share with you today. And that's the takeaway part. And then below that, are a series of tools that we explore over the 4 days. And I will just show a handful of those tools and just sketch them. As you can imagine, on a short seminar like this, you're not going to learn how to use the one or the other tool, because we learn that together. We have to, we sketch it out, we draw it, we apply it to a case, we sort of unpick it slowly. That cannot happen today, but I can at least sort of pinpoint what kind of tools you might encounter. But the overarching themes that you might take away from a course like this, we can certainly, talk about those. And that is really the essence of taking away something from your time with us today. And I'll start with that. So some of these key takeaway themes, and that will be underpinned over the 4 days with the guest speakers, with the case studies, and with the tools, is the following. That if you look at great business strategists, and we often look at military strategists in cases like this, so that's a typical thing in marketing strategy, you will find across military as well as in business, the same theme, that the great strategists, the great leaders, the great managing directors, maybe even the great CEOs, but we won't look, that's too high up. Yeah, but let's say you want to be a managing director, you want to manage a strategic business unit. Those who are highly successful, they stick to the basics. So it's not that they have super secret tools that nobody else has, and that gives them the edge in their thinking and positioning. The funny thing is, the more successful ones you look at are the ones that have actually not forgotten the basics of strategic thinking and formulation. They haven't lost sight of that. So they are well grounded in the basics. It's nearly like when let's say you want to look, when you look at a professional tennis player. Oftentimes when they bring in a new coach, and these are already fantastic players, right? They're professional tennis players, one in 100,000 already. The coaches will often go back and say, right, well, let's look at your basic stance on a forehand, on your backhand. Let's look if you're swinging through completely. What's your footwork actually like? Something you learn, on day one, really. Where's your weight? Are you leaning into the ball? Are you leaning back as you strike the ball? So they go back and revisit the basics. That's, for instance, what, let's say, a Boris Becker would do when he joined Djokovic as a coach for 2 or 3 years, I think it was, and helped Djokovic really win a large amount of tournaments in that limited period. It went back to the basics. So this is one major takeaway that will be showcased across the 4 days. It's actually, are you aware of the basics in thinking strategically? And those basics are underpinned by certain systematic approaches and models. So the professionals, and that separates them from the amateurs, they stick to certain routines. And the routines reduce the likelihood of making an error, of overlooking a particular important piece of information. And so that's generally one major theme we want to emphasize here. This is about, no matter how well versed you think you are, in a sense, we're going to make sure that you are actually solid in the basics, because that is the foundation for all to move to the next level, no matter which level you're at. So again, Djokovic was already very, 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 very successful. He brings in Boris Becker and says, can you help me? Now, how can you help somebody who's already, number one in the world at the time? What do you do to help? And the help is, let's just make sure you've got those basics, because over time you get lazy. You take shortcuts. You've gotten used to success, and you start relying a lot on your instincts. Yeah, because you're already a middle manager, you've had some success. And it's that laziness and those shortcuts that have to be again trimmed back and revisited. And in a sense, that this unlocking does exactly that. You've got something, but you haven't fully unlocked the potential yet. Now, below that idea of let's stick to your knitting, go back to basics, are a number of ideas, such as you've got to be focused in your strategy. You can't dance on multiple weddings at the same time. You cannot diversify too much. At the same time, when do you diversify? When do you leave a market and enter a new market? What are the criteria that you would present to your managing director to make a case that your standard business is no longer munificent? We need to actually move into a different field. The idea here, a classic one would be, IBM no longer making desktops and laptops. The IBM ThinkPad, which Lenovo now has, is really an IBM invention, right? The IBM ThinkPad, the Rolls-Royce of laptops. They sold the business. They left their core business and sold it to a competitor. Under what circumstances do you make that decision? How do you make that decision? How do you defend it? These are the kinds of initial questions on the first day we'll look at. And that is what you're looking at here. Now, you're looking at a SWOT analysis. You must be going, my goodness, SWOT analysis, that's from the 1950s. What are we doing here? This is going back to basics, but not just going back to old stuff. This, for instance, this SWOT analysis, which would be one of our first tools, is a very modern version of it. And you won't see it on the slide, but just to sort of whet your appetite, while the analysis of opportunities and threats in the market versus your strengths and weaknesses to access that is a tried and proven logic. And we need to remind ourselves of that logic. We need to revisit it repeatedly, but it doesn't mean because it's tried and proven that it's obsolete. What is obsolete often is the way you analyze opportunities and threats, strengths and weaknesses, because of course, in a way, tech, intellectual tech, if you like, has evolved. And we would explore a SWOT analysis that is numerical. So not 2 by 2, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, and we write something in each box. Nothing like that. It's a series of factors that we analyze numerically from 1 to 7. And we would look at on the opportunities and threats side here, you'll see size of market, growth of market, usual suspects, and then competitive hostility, supplier power, and the list goes on, buyer power. We know that these factors are highly predictive. It's like your X1, X2, X3 in the multiple regression on the left side, and on the right side is your Y, your dependent variable, right? These variables, your size, growth, hostility, power, substitutes, and so on, are your independent variables in a regression in a sense. And they explain a lot of whether a market is or not opportune. And if it's not opportune, it's threatening, opportunities and threats. So this basically analysis, which I can only sketch in the broader sense here, it is still a SWOT analysis, but we collapse opportunities and threats into a scale from 1 to 7 and look at a series of known factors that explain that variation in opportunities and threats. So the larger the size of the market, the lower the buyer power, the less cyclical a market, the more we know a market is opportune. That is, it's a market you want to be in or enter. Now, we're not talking about segments here, we're talking about markets. So let's say long haul versus short haul in the aviation industry. It is different markets, desktops, if people still use desktops, and they do, versus laptops. So completely different markets. And that is where the strategic thought has to begin. Am I even in the right market? What are the opportunities in the market? And how do I know that these are opportunities? And to what extent are the opportunities and not threats? Here we have a list of factors, and we will then explore how we numerically establish opportunities or threats on a sliding scale. We also know that opportunities and threats are there per se, but they are not the same opportunity for each market actor, for each business. So then we have to look at, well, what are my internal organizational competencies to access those opportunities? Because there might be a great opportunity, but my business simply is not geared towards, not calibrated to accessing that opportunity, or is no longer able to use the opportunity. IBM selling desktops and laptops and everything to their competitors, and Lenovo saying, thank you very much, we'll give you money for your business because we can use that a lot more. Our strengths are greater for this kind of opportunity than yours, IBM. So how do you make that case? Can you just go in front of the board and say, I think we should move to another market, and I don't think we're as good as we could be, and therefore we need to, go find a different green field? Presentations like that go nowhere. So how do you back that up? And so here, on which factors do you look towards? We explore those up front. What we really explore is simply where your cost factors and your ability to differentiate yourself in your value proposition in a sustainable way compared to others. So of all the things you would look at to establish whether you're strong or weak, we have to decide which ones are the most indicative. And we will conclude that it is either your ability to be a cost leader expressed in price, such as Ryanair, Aldi, Lidl, Costco, you name it, those price competitors, or whether you express yourself as a differentiator, your ability to express yourself like a Hyatt, like a Hilton, like Audi, like Waitrose. Those are the factors that in the end matter more. And we will explore why, how we numerically measure those. And then, if you could go to the next slide, what we do is we take those numbers and we put them in the these two dimensions here, market munificence and differential position, and we chart them. And wherever the lines that we chart, obviously I can't show you this here. We have to do this with a whiteboard and work it out together. But where the intersection is, it will either be in one of these 9 boxes: divest, harvest, maintain, grow, and so on. And what you're seeing here is that the question, should I be in a market or should I not be in a market, is much more refined than that. It is actually, if I should be in a market, if I should stay, if I should continue to sell what my core business, then the question is, how do I stay? Do I, for instance, just harvest the market, take as much cream off the top as possible and invest very little? So basically a prolonged, very slow divestiture strategy over several years, knowing that in 5 or 6 years, you're going to be out of this market. So you're creaming off the top. That's harvest. But there's another option, of course, and that is you want to maintain a steady foothold, a steady position in the market, ongoing. When do you maintain? When do you harvest? And hey, maybe you decide, or you want to grow, you want to actually expand your business, which of course most people want to do. Here, what you will see in this box is only in certain circumstances is growth warranted. And sometimes it's maintain and harvest, depending where the intersections will be in these various boxes. Because where the intersection is in the box is your command. You shall harvest. You should grow. Now, some of you might say, well, what's this box? Where does this come from? Did you just come up with this, Bryan? Of course not. These are boxes that are, or the tools like this are based on, in this particular case, we're looking at a modernized GE, General Electric, McKinsey matrix, McKinsey, the consulting company matrix. So these matrices are based on thousands of case studies. It's an accumulation of best practices. Let's say you have an average differential position, so at that bottom horizontal, but you face, let's say, a medium attractive market in terms of opportunities and threats. So you go back to the SWOT analysis for that. What should you do? So you're sort of midfield, you're good. You have some value propositions that have traction in the market, and you've got reliable customers, loyal customers. It's all there. The market produces a decent return. It's a medium efficient market. Well, what is the best option? You could, of course, grow. You could say, not good enough, I want to sell, I divest. You could say, I want to harvest, I'm just going to take as much as I can for the next 4 or 5 years, and then I'm out of this market, I'm going somewhere else. So which of these options do you take? Here you see in this box, it is maintain. Yeah, if you look at where average and medium intersect, it's in the middle, right in the center, that middle box. So the best practice suggests, don't try and grow, don't sell, don't try and harvest, but actually, reinvest and try and hold the position, maintain. And why does the box suggest that? The benchmark is shareholder return. So the best return for the decision what to do in a market that is of average munificence. There's medium growth, medium size, some hostility and all and so on. And you're pretty good at it, you're pretty good in the market. You're number 5 or number 6. Customers eventually come to you as well. What should you do? Try and grow? No. From a shareholder value maximization perspective, which is the perspective underpinning this particular matrix, the best option is to maintain. And we will explore the various variants here. So basically, you already now can see that you will be put in a position already on the first day to actually do a numerical SWOT analysis, whereby you can look at 3 or 4 different markets, analyze them numerically, take those numbers, insert them in this GE McKinsey matrix, and it will tell you what to do for each of these markets based on best practice in the past. Now, you could ignore that advice that comes through this analysis, but it gives you a steer, doesn't it? It says, listen, growth is probably not what you should be doing here. From a shareholder perspective, creating more value for the firm, making the value of the firm go up from a share price perspective, privately owned or publicly listed. If the business is registered as a business, they are shareholders. Yeah, PTY Limited has shareholders. So we can have a shareholder perspective here. From an owner's perspective, and you're working for the owners, they're paying you money to make their money more. Let's face it. The best decision will be often not to grow. And if you look in the top left box, for instance, you see a bizarre situation on that far left upper one. Divest and grow, 2 opposite commands. So you are, from your strengths and weaknesses perspective, which is the bottom, not well set up. Yeah, you don't have compelling value propositions. You don't have a strong cost position. You're something like an Asda, or a Morrison's, like who goes to shop there. Other than that, it's maybe the closest. They're stuck in the middle strategically, and both these companies are having severe problems, as you would know if you read the business press. They're losing market share. They're not making any money, and it's obvious why. So they're down disadvantaged, for instance. But let's say they find themselves in a market that is really opportune across those factors we looked at earlier. They really actually have 2 options which are opposite. The one is to divest, in other words, to sell. To sell. Don't forget, Walmart sold Asda. Or the new venture capitalists, the private equity that owns most of Asda now, and so does private equity own Morrison's, by the way. They come in and say, alternatively, we could grow. That's that other word there. We're currently not strong. We're currently got a lot of operational problems and all sorts of problems internally, which we, of course, can control. If we can sort that out, if we can replenish management, fix the strategic thinking, get the operations sorted, clean up the shop, get the rubbish out of the bushes in the parking lot, the basic stuff, make the place a nice place to go to. We could actually move the business across to average and into advantaged because the market is opportune. So these are sorts of ideas you will explore and revisit. Some of this you might say, well, actually, I know all of that, Brian. But if you went to Djokovic and said, listen, Jocko, you need to lean more into your forehand. He's going to look at you and say, what do you yeah. But then you might show him a video and say, look at you in slow motion. You're not leaning in as much as you could. Therefore, you don't have enough weight on the ball. This is the kind of thinking we're going to have here. We're going to revisit what actually seems obvious and what most of you think you know, but we'll put it under a test and ask ourselves, is this really what you're doing? Are you really cognizant of these basic principles? So are you in a situation of divest or grow? Are you in a situation where best practice suggests maintain, let's say bottom right, super advantaged you're super set up, you've got great products, but the market is not very immune efficient, so it's low on the side. And you actually, if you were asked, what are you doing? You'd say, our sales team has the command to grow, sell, 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 because we've got such a strong business. We're advantaged. And then you would look at this and say, but the analysis actually suggests from a shareholder return perspective, growth is actually not as productive. Maintain, in other words, hold the business. Don't try and grow it against all sorts of obstacles, is better for you. This is then where you move from a good level to a superior level of performance. And this is what we're talking about in these workshops. Now, these tools, we can spend a lot more on them. I just wanted to give you sort of an appetite. So they look very simple, very basic, but it's these basic tools that challenge and require you to go back and think about your basic strategies. And are you still, have you lost your way in a sense? And as you lose your way, you've basically locked up some of your competitive advantage. And we want to actually unlock that, bring you back on a straight path. And why, how to do that. And how could you make that case to your line managers, to the board, to give you those tools to be able to make that case, not just talk, but actually say, this is how I've arrived at my proposal. And it's along these analyses that I've come to the conclusion, from my perspective, as your senior managing director, we need to do this. Or let's say you have the ear of the managing director and you say, listen, I've done a bit of work here. I've thought this through. Look at the facts. Are we actually doing what we should be doing? So it's this kind of stuff that I'm thinking we can explore nicely. So if you go to the next slide, please. And there's only one more after this, folks. This here is something some you might know of. Look, most of you might have run into, which is already an old book in a sense, it's 16 years old, called Blue Ocean Strategy. And when that came out, it was a sensation. It's one of the few business books, a book with a dust cover, so it's not a textbook, that's sold in the millions. That is very, very rare for a business book, particularly one that is full of charts and graphs and tools and strategic thinking. It's normally maybe a business biography or something like that goes in, it goes to those sorts of sales numbers. So this Blue Ocean Strategy is a milestone in modern strategy, and has been refined and worked on over the years. And what you're looking here as is something called the strategy canvas, which is a centerpiece of Blue Ocean Strategy. And we will explore this canvas. We will look at its more modern refinements, how to use it, and particularly how to formulate explicitly a value proposition. So this then comes down and says, okay, in a particular market, we want to grow. This tool says, let us explore how to grow. Or let's say in the previous slide, the analysis suggests you should actually divest. In other words, stay in the market for a few more years, but you're not overcommitting anymore because there's a limited lifespan in this market. So how do you go about this? Strategically how do you maintain a product, a goods or service, for those next 4 or 5 years so that you still are making money? Versus how do you create a value proposition if the intent is to grow, absolutely grow, healthful level move for it? This tool helps you do that. And of course, this is all based on drawings. This is, picture is worth 1,000 words. That's the principle of Blue Ocean Strategy, and certainly of the strategy canvas. That's why it's called canvas. You're supposed to draw on it. We're not going to draw here. But what you will find when we look at our drawings, we are able to draw existing strategies. And by looking at the picture, we can say this is a rubbish strategy or it's a good strategy. And we will be able to say that by looking for certain criteria that come along with winning strategies. And you can actually graphically reveal that. And that is why this is so successful. That's why this book sold for so much, so many copies. And you might be interested in how to do this. and what to look for and how to draw something like this. Moreover, for instance, this tool is one where you formulate the value proposition with a lot of people in the room. So another idea embedded here is that it's no good to go on a strategic retreat and then you return after 3 days and you've had a great time in those 3 days to the office and say, team, we've got a new strategy. Here it is. Often those people who have to actually go out there in the trenches and execute, if they don't buy it, if they were not part of the creation process, they're doing their job, but are they doing it with commitment? And do they always buy into it? Many times they do, but often they don't. And the way to get around that is to say, listen, we're not going on a strategic retreat. We're actually going to work on our new value proposition together. 40 people in a room, 50 people in a room. That's what this tool is designed to do. Kim and Rabonia, the authors, say precisely that we need to stay at the office when it comes to formulation of strategy. So then, of course, you cannot create folders with 20 pages of words. You draw pictures. That's how you engage 40 people. And you will find lots of analogies like that in the military. So the battle, or in this case, the Navy, so there's a famous sea battle some of you will know, of course, that's the Battle of Trafalgar. It turned European maritime history around for the next at least 150 years in favor of the British. And the battle plan is basically, it was auctioned several years ago at an auction house in London. It's what Admiral Nelson drew in the cabin of the Victory. And there's not a single word, not one word on that canvas. He drew it in the cabin with his senior officers around him and the captains of the other ships. And they stood there and he drew it with them. He already had the plan in his head. He could have easily just drawn it and had it dispatched to all the ships with a text saying, this is what I want you to do. But he didn't do that. He said, you all come over here, white piece of canvas, gentlemen in this case, this is what we're going to do. And then he draws it out with them. So they have that sense of co-creation, if you like. And there's many examples like this. And so another overarching takeaway point, something you can take away from this little webinar, is that, certainly my experience, if you cannot draw it, it's not worth it. You have to be able to draw your value proposition, your product, your specific product strategy that is to execute growth or to execute harvest or maintain. You have to be able to draw it. And if you cannot draw it, it's too complicated. And if it's too complicated, the folks in the field don't understand it. Or they'll start cutting corners and they'll reinterpret it their way to make it usable. And as they do that, often it loses some of its essence. So from the outset, it has to be manageable and easy to understand and owned by those who then carry the responsibility for execution. All of that sits really behind this strategy canvas. And so as a takeaway point for you, whatever your current tactic or strategy is, can you draw it? Could you go to a colleague and say, as you know, we're launching this and this, I don't know, insurance product. How would you draw it? And if you ask 3, would they draw something similar? That's the acid test. And if that test doesn't hold, then you've got problems. It doesn't mean that you're going to go out of business. We're not talking about surviving or not surviving. It's talking about moving from, number 11 in the market up to maybe number 4, number 5, maybe number 2, number 1, but moving up and actually creating greater returns for the business, for the owners of the business, be that you or of course, the people who are paying you. And hopefully they also pay you an incentive for success, a bonus. Okay, so that's that strategy. We spend a lot of time on this. We do a number of analyses with it, looking at businesses, good businesses, bad businesses. The last tool, please, and that is also coming to the end of our little talk here, is we also then have to explore at the end. There's lots of other tools. We look at segmentation, for instance. We look at brand repositioning, because all of that is part of growing, maintaining, harvesting. You know, you have to work on the brand. You have to, of course, decide on a price point. Now, pricing is often not discussed in business schools. Certainly not in strategic marketing, in market management. And this is really about managing the market. But you manage the market by setting a price, in part. Yep. You need a product, you need a price. So how do you go about this? How do you find a price that is absolutely value maximizing? And we would look at a variety of principles, not here on the slide. But one of the guiding principles is you've got to set a price that the customer, the prospective customer, client, cannot refuse. So it's got to be a price you cannot refuse. And we explore you how to set that price. And just roughly, it goes from the same form. We ask ourselves, if I'm a museum and I want 17 to 34-year-olds to come to the museum, I might find that I don't have enough from the younger cohorts. I just get older families and so on. Let's say I'm the Natural History Museum in London, and I want a younger clientele. How do I attract them? One aspect is to look at the pricing. And so I might ask myself, what do other museums charge? That same form, that's that column far on the left. And I get an idea of what all the other museums charge. And I have a look whether I'm in that price range or not. But then I must ask myself, well, other than going to a museum, how might people also educate themselves? They might go to a palace. They might go to some other, they might go to Kew Gardens and inform themselves about, you know, natural history in a different way, not in a museum. And what's the price there? That's this thing, different form, Kew Gardens, that has nothing to do with the museum, right? But the same function. It's about education, it's about learning, it's about spending time somewhere, possibly with the family. Yeah, that's sort of that purpose when you go to museums or things like that. So the point is, what's that price range? And then the last thing is you go even further and say, okay, so different form and different function, but let's say ultimately, what's the objective of people who want to go to a museum? In the end, they might actually be wanting to spend some time together in a learned environment in the broader sense. So what other events offer that are not going to a museum and that are not going to, I don't know, an open house or a castle or to Buckingham Palace or something like that? So, you know, another way of learning about British history. What other things perform that objective and what are their prices? So I'll stop there because you can see already these tools force you to think systematically further and further out beyond your comfort zone. And that is what makes the difference, I think, between an amateur and a professional, because they've got the tools to think more rigorously, to think more widely, and to think in a much more systematic way. And those are some of these key takeaways that I, in the past, or, you know, over nearly 25 years now, have observed as being the key characteristics of great business leaders at any level, at the strategic business unit level, you know, at the company level, and so on, or below. They have this ability to know what's important and what's not important, and often they use simple heuristic tools. Basic heuristic tools. The leaders don't have 4 screens in front of them, all with Excel sheets on them. The boss's office often has no computer in it, or maybe a laptop, and that laptop lid is closed. That's my observation in the last 25 years. So we want to revisit what seems an inverse relationship with market management and strategic thinking. That brings it to an end. Gives you an idea. This is, of course, 4 days worth of stuff in the end with all the things I mentioned. If there's any questions, go ahead.
I'm not sure that we do have any questions. I can't see the chat, however. If not, well, thank you very much, Bryan, for delivering this webinar today. And like I said before, the content does feature really heavily in the Unlocking Strategic Competitive Advantage course. So if you do have any questions or want to reach out about that, then please do let me know.
No problem at all, folks. So, you come along to the seminar, to the 4 days, and yeah, if any of this interests you, or of course the other short courses. Of course, there's others, all kinds of topics, but this gives you sort of an idea of what this portfolio of short courses is about. The same kind of thinking would apply, let's say, to any of the other topics that have little to do with strategy. Let's say so a topic on productivity or something like that. Okay, Eve, so thanks so much for hosting it.
Fab.
And all of you on the call, I can see certainly more than I can see here on one screen. So thank you all for coming, and hopefully you can just take away, if anything, folks, remind yourself of the basics. Don't lose sight, and revisit if you can the basics in terms of your strategic thinking.